So much phlegm. Oh my God. I am Rabbi Sol Solomon, founder and spiritual leader of Temple Sons of Bitches in Great Neck, New York. And I am thrilled and delighted to be talking to, well, let's see, what's the name of this man's show? It'll come to me. Hold on, don't tell me. Don't tell me. Something about God, something about Jewish, and there's a third thing. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is Jews, God, and history, not necessarily in that order. A one-person show featuring the person that we are staring at the moment. He has written articles for the Los Angeles Times and the Huffington Post. He actually had a decade of doing stand-up comedy. He wrote, and you should pardon the expression, an oral history of Bill Clinton, told by the people who knew him and worked with him. And of course, now he's got Jews, God, and history, and MICHAEL TAKIFF. Shalom and welcome.
Shalom, good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos to you, sir. So I guess you're not Orthodox.
I would guess that's correct. And you're, despite your payas, I guess the day I have to assume you are not exactly Orthodox, or at least very modern Orthodox.
Yeah, I'm sort of moron Orthodox is what they call me. That's where I go with that. But let me ask you, what's your upbringing? What section of Jewishism were you?
Jewishism. That's good. We were Orthodox by affiliation, but not by practice. Which means that we were somewhat kosher. We were not kosher. We were somewhat kosher. It's interesting. We grew up. We did not eat the big time treif. We didn't eat pork or shellfish. We did. My mother did get the chicken and the beef from the A&P, not the kosher butcher. However, I remember from when I was very young, and my siblings were older than I remember clearly, that sometimes we would have bacon at breakfast. And my mother told me that when my father was the religious one in the marriage, my mother was a free thinker. She was raised kind of a red diaper baby. My mother told me that during the 40s, when they were courting, they'd go to Coney Island, and my father would eat clams on the half shell, which even she found too disgusting. But my father decided to set a better example for his children. The deciding event seems to have been the death of his father. I was 4 years old. This was about many years ago. And he went to the Orthodox shul 3 blocks away from our house, and he said Kaddish, and he was surrounded by these men. So he decided that it was time for us to give up eating treif. So we gave up eating treif. We also gave up ever having eaten treif. So that whenever the subject would come up, my father would say, "No, we didn't have bacon at breakfast." All right, no, and if we went to, we never did that. And then if we went to a restaurant and the soup of the day was lobster bisque, he would say, "That's not food for Jews."
Even though he had been eating clams.
That's my watchword. That's not food for Jews. And I eat the same way now.
I love Jewish hypocrisy. There's no better hypocrisy in the. If you're going to be a hypocrite, be a Jewish hypocrite.
You might as well.
Because we are the chosen hypocrites. I love that.
Chosen. Exactly.
Tell us, by the way, now you do come by your orthodoxy by proxy. Very honestly, though, is it true that your great grandfather was a fairly major rabbi?
This is the family lore. I have no proof of this, but this is the family lore. My uncle Milton had a book, and it was handed down from someone to someone to someone. And it turns out that he decided that we were calculated, that we were all descendants of the great sage Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. And that's the right reaction. Thank you.
Yes.
And because I don't get that much reaction for myself, but if I can get it for an ancestor, I'm pleased.
Yeah, say the name again one more time.
Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much. That's so, right.
Well, did they tell you about him? Did they say, "Oh, this is really great"?
Well, he was known. No, you can read about him there's a chapter on him in the book by Elie Wiesel, Souls on Fire, and he's famous for. He had a very sunny disposition, but he's also famous for putting God on trial, for questioning God and saying, "Well, here it is, Yom Kippur, God, and we have to atone to you, but come on." we have some issues here too. So
And this was pre-Holocaust. I mean, this
this
was
was,
like,
yes,
yeah, way before.
yeah, this was centuries ago. So there's some of that in my show, asking God, well, okay, it's time for you to answer some questions. So
Well, let me ask you, how does, don't give away the ending, but how does God come out in your show?
well, there are many different images of God. There is God. We see God in several different faces and guises. God starts out. The show starts out. There you go. The show starts out with God and Abraham. It starts out with the founding of the Jewish people. Appropriately enough, for Jews, God, and history, it starts out with the beginning of our history. And God is really proud. He wants to start this thing called the Jewish people. He wants to start the Jews, and it's going to lead to bagels and to movie moguls and to sports agents and crooked hedge fund managers and all these wonderful things. And then God says to Abraham, well, Abraham says, well, what's my end of the deal? And also spectacular cold cuts, God says. And which, after all, that's a reason for
That's all
having
that
kids.
counts.
That's pretty
Pastrami is so
important.
far more important than
I'm
anything.
telling you.
Yes.
A good pastrami sandwich. Anyway, and then Abraham says, well, what's my end of the deal? And God says, well, believe me, there's one true God. And Abraham says, yeah, okay. Walking the path of righteousness all your days. Abraham says, well, is it a long walk? Are the steps? Well, all right. And then God says, number 3, mutilate your private parts. And Abraham says, are you kidding? Seriously? Really? This is what you want me to do? So this is God starting out. And then, yeah, exactly. This is kind of, and to this day, this is the thing about us. We do this thing called the bris. And what we do is we take our newborn son, who's a week old, most vulnerable creature we can imagine. And the mother, of course, is plotting and going crazy because she's just given birth, and there's this strange rabbi in this white coat coming to do this thing to her child. And we mutilate him irreparably. And then what do? We eat. We have bagels. I mean, and it's just this normal thing. But if you sit down to think about it, it's really strange.
Oh, and that is why I'm one of those rabbis. When I do it, I use my teeth. I don't do the knife thing. I just go.
One of those.
Yeah, spit it out. There's a little bit of blood. You're a little peroxide. The kid's fine. It's true. Or if it's not fine, it's a girl. And this day and age, the boys, the girls are all the same anyway. They all want to be the other. You have a boy that wants to be a girl. You have a girl that wants to be a boy. So if you tear off too much down there, does it really matter? This is what I want to know.
There you go.
So did the Jews, God, and history thing, did it come to you as like first as an essay or a book, and they said, I should do this on stage? Or did you feel like as a theater thing first?
I have, as you mentioned, I have a background in stand-up comedy. I have a background in writing. After my father, I wasn't really doing. At the time I was a stand-up comic. My father died in 1992 on Christmas Day, 1992. In fact,
that's a long time. I'm sorry. Was he sick, or why? That was a long.
Well, yeah, he was old and he had chronic lung disease. But this was a while ago, so I'll get over it eventually. But anyway, he died, and I started. Loss of a parent. This is the first of my parents to go. It's a seismic event in someone's life, and I sat down and started writing about it. And I wrote about him and our family and his life and death. But also, I started writing about Jewish subjects, and life as an American Jew, my upbringing as a Jew, and a lot of it, I started to work on it as a performance piece, and then I was going to try to stage it, but then I started writing books. I got a book contract. I've written a couple of history books, as you mentioned. I wrote a book about American military veterans. I wrote a biography of Bill Clinton. But at one point, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, I decided to do what I had intended, which was to turn it into a stage show. Because I came to New York to be an actor. I studied singing. I was a stand-up comic. And I started working with the director, and it turns out I had 2 shows. So this is actually the second show. I have one show that's really, it's called Black Tie, His Son's Journey Through the Death and Life of his father. And that's really more a family memoir. It's mostly about my dad, but about the whole family. This one is about the family, but it's really more just about, it's about being Jewish in America. It's about how we look at God. in the modern era. It's for Jews, but it's not only about Jews. It's about how modern humans live with ancient traditions. I mean, if you think about it, our traditions, Abraham, for example, that we mentioned, is said to have lived 4,000 years ago. So that was 4,000 years ago. Since then, we've learned a few things about the universe. The sun does not revolve around the earth. The earth revolves around the sun.
Wait, what? What?
I know. Are you shocked?
I was taught differently. I don't know. You say what you say.
Copernicus is on your Copernicus. You haven't gotten to Copernicus is on your next podcast. And Darwin is on your podcast after that. He told us, well, the world wasn't exactly created in 6 days, fully formed. But here we are. We still look at these traditions. We still say these ancient prayers. What do they mean to us today? How do we approach that? How do we live with all that?
And well, I mean, again, where do you come out the other side of this? Because so many people, from Saul Bellow to Larry David, are going through what does it mean to be Jew, and me, Jewish in America, Jewish now, connection to ancient ridiculous customs, but you don't want to leave them because without them, you're kind of wandering around lost. Where do you come down, like at the end of your show, on all of this?
It's complicated. There's no simple answer, really. I think that for me, we talk a lot about God, and I talk in the show, and this is something that audiences sometimes are a little puzzled by, but I don't mind that. I say to the people, well, flat out, I'm an atheist, and I don't believe in things you can't prove, and with no basis in fact, UFOs and unicorns and God, and this is not something that an educated, scientifically minded person would believe in, and yet
Tooth Fairy, I believe in. I should mention that. Well, Tooth Fairy, yes, very much so.
Well, how much did you get when you're
not nearly enough? The Tooth Fairy's Jewish, and a thing would come out of my face. I would put it under a pillow. I thought, oh, this has got to be worth hundreds of dollars. And I lift up the pillow and it's like $2. I'm like, fuck you, Tooth Fairy. But I knew
$2. You got $2.
Depending on that. Not for one of these. Yeah.
That's pretty good. $2. I got a 15 cents.
5 cents is horrible.
But now, if I lose a tooth, I have to pay the oral surgeon $2,000. So
he's also Jewish.
Of course he is. But where's the justice? Of course he's Jewish. What? Hello. This is New York City. What? There's a non-Jewish dentist somewhere. I don't know. What are you thinking?
What a terrible idea that would have.
Yeah, but anyway, we were talking about it. But I also, in this show, I talk about this, but I also can't stop talking about God. And I have several representations of God. And I talk about God visiting this synagogue where I grew up, this Orthodox synagogue in New Jersey, where I grew up, and God
never goes to New Jersey. Of all places in the world, there's one place God doesn't go. Even God.
No, you didn't know the rabbi at my show in New Jersey. He was remarkable. And if God was anywhere on Yom Kippur, Jerusalem, Crown Heights, Elizabeth, trust me, if you ever saw this guy, you'd understand. And if you come see my show, you will understand, because so the second act begins with a recreation of Yom Kippur, the Yom Kippur service, ending with Nila. Yeah.
Are people allowed to eat? Because
no, you can't eat during the show.
Can't eat during the show. Have to wear no leather soles.
No leather sole. A white kittle, a white little jacket, and yeah, you can.
And I was told you have to blow the shofar, but I'm not gay, so I'm not going to do that. But we're talking with Michael here on Dave's Gone By. I'm Rabbi Sol. What the show that he is talking about that is behind him, I want to let you know, I want to remind you that you can see Jews, God, and history, not necessarily in that order, live necessarily at the Siggy Theater, which is named after, and Sigourney Weaver, actually named it after her, of the Flea Theater, which is now at 30 Thomas Street.
Yes, it's on Thomas Street, and you can go to JewsGodAndHistory.com for information and tickets.
And it's playing from May 18th through June 5th. So it hasn't started yet, but it's starting like a week or so at the theater. Soon. So I apologize again. I'm pulling you all over the place and not letting you really finish a thought, which is also Jewish. So Talmudically, you were on the thread of God appearing in places and where Jews are in terms of God in the modern world and in your show.
Yeah, where do we look for God? How do we look at God? God can mean so many things to so many different people today. Is it the old man in the white beard? And as you can see in Michelangelo, portrayed by Michelangelo in the Sistine Ceiling? Is it this sort of impenetrable, unknowable God force, which is, I guess, the Reconstructionists believe, the Reconstructionists who are really, let's face it, Buddhists who like chopped liver? And is you know
I'm
what?
stealing that. I'm stealing that line. Thank you.
I got to laugh that you have your audience there. Thank you very much.
That's my darling. Yeah, that's my wife Miriam Libby. We've
You're
been
ever
married
loving.
for God knows we have 21 and a half beautiful. Well, they're not all beautiful. There's some inbreeding going on, but she's a
Wait a
wonderful.
minute. Wait a minute. Only 21 and a half? What's the matter with you? You've got the pace. You should have 30.
Well, during the pandemic, we got bored.
I understand. You took a break.
I'm sorry, but continue. Please continue. This is
I don't know where was I? I was talking
no
about God, and the other thing that's a very big
and Reform Jews you were mentioning and things like that.
Reform Jews, or Presbyterians, in other words.
Not
At a Reform shul, they have a choir, they have robes, they have an organ, they have a cross, and no, well, they don't really. I'm just kidding. They don't have an organ. Anyway, so the other thing that Jews, and this is in the modern era, how do we? I don't mean to break up the levity here for a minute, but you'll forgive me for mentioning the big word, the H word, the Holocaust. After what happened?
Wait, no, I will stop you again because we were talking for like 15 minutes, and I mentioned the Holocaust. There's a rule that if 2 or 3 Jews are in a room, they must mention the Holocaust at some point in the first 10 minutes of conversation. But I did bring it up before. I said post-Holocaust and something.
In fact, my wife and I, we have this sort of game, and my wife especially, it's like, how long in the day, if you turn on like NPR or open the New York Times, how much of the morning goes by before there's some reference? And it's usually, I don't know, 15 minutes.
Right. Exactly.
So, and then check. Okay, that's it. I can go off my day. Check. It's been done. Okay, check that box. Move on with the day.
It would be shorter, but there's goyim involved, so it takes longer.
But a lot of them love to talk about it too. So anyway.
So to the Holocaust. Let's get all serious. Holocaust. Go.
After the Shoah, how do we go on being Jews? What do we think? We've had this relationship with God. We've been the quote unquote chosen people. We've had this intimate relationship with God for thousands of years. We stuck by this God, by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then what happened? Do we believe in God after this? Where we can there. I think there are a couple of ways of interpreting, 2 main ways, and these are both in my show, both in Jews, God, and History, not necessarily in that order. At the Flea Theater, JewsGodAndHistory.com. Thank you.
Posted in the chat.
One way would be to just say, "That's it, God, I'm done. You had your chance, you blew it. Where were we when you needed you? I'm finished." But there are other Jews, and there's a lot about this in this show too. And in this show where I was telling you about, where God showed up every Yom Kippur. The whole edifice, it was a shul, yeshiva, was financed by these men. They were survivors of the camps, and they came to America after the war, and they lived in this New Jersey town. There was a dynamic rabbi, and they built up because they were wealthy men. They were mostly in construction industry. They were builders, developers of land and property, and that sort of thing. And I think what it was for them, and of course I'm extrapolating here, I didn't talk to them, but what it seems to me is that they were sitting there saying that even after the Holocaust, especially after the Holocaust, Jews are obligated to honor and believe in the God of their ancestors. What they're saying is, Hitler, you failed. You're dead. We're here. Judaism lives. So there are a couple of ways. I think those are both legitimate ways of approaching the question post-Shoah. The right way is up to individual people, but I think those are 2 ways of looking at it.
Well, if I may personally speak as a camp survivor, because I survived Ocean Parkway Jewish Day Camp, it was terrible. It was raining all the time. Had no fun.
It was raining all the time, and the bug juice was awful.
It was a kosher bug juice. We've never had anything.
Terrible.
But there is that thought of just like, okay, God. I mean, I wonder also, like, we think of the Holocaust because it's within our 100-year parameter.
Yeah.
Back in the day when Queen Isabella expelled all those Jews, that was horrible too. and
It
somehow
was.
Judaism came on, and Jews were burned at the stake and burned in mass graves, and there were pogroms. So for us, we say Holocaust because the number is so big.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, the Holocaust, how can we? It's like throughout history, Jews have
of
taken
course.
shit, and if you're right there in the middle of it, you had to be wondering the same thing. You had to be wondering,
Right.
where's God? Where's God? We're on a boat now to the Indies with Columbus because Queen Isabella threw us out of the thing. Fuck you, God. But we still believe in you. Can we have some cream cheese? Yeah, it's that.
Exactly. So it's this central paradox. It's this contradiction that we live with. And even if we don't believe in God, and I don't believe in the supernatural God really, and what we still go on in some way being Jews.
Yeah, because
Why? Is
it's
it just it's comfortable? I don't think so. I think there's more to it than that. There's something in the tradition that speaks to us,
it's true.
something in the history that speaks to us. And don't forget, Jews we are at present we're 0.2% of the world's population, and and there was this tiny people from this sort of remote corner of the Roman Empire, and look at the effect Jews have had on the world.
We control the media. Thank God for that.
Oh,
I
don't
mean,
forget the banks,
of course, of
and
course.
excuse me, the space lasers.
I'm all for space lasers. I think
Space lasers. We
they're
control the
good.
space lasers.
No, none of us will have to wear glasses again. We'll actually have lasers that can do this right from space. It'll zap me. It'll go. Look at
Open it up
oh
and
my God! Hold on, I can't even see with this thing. One moment, please. There we go. Okay, that's so
oh,
much better.
beautiful.
Thank you. So let me also ask you. Moving a little bit away from direct Jewishness, but still in terms of history and telling stories. One of the things that you do as a sideline is coach people in how to write a memoir, how to tell their own stories. What are
Right
one of
on.
the two most important things that you tell someone who's like, look, I've had a life with some really interesting, fun anecdotes, but how do I write a book? How do I tell this how do you get them on the path?
Well, usually what I'll do is I'll sit down and talk. Depends what they want to do. I mean, I'll sit down and talk with them and record it, and then string together the stories from the recordings. Or if they write it themselves, I will go through and try to organize it. I mean, I taught, I teach memoir writing, and I have my rules of good writing. And the important thing really is just to go from one thing to the next. It's a logical flow. Your verbiage should be economical. You shouldn't have a lot of extra words. Don't have stuff there you don't need. But I guess if I tell people, it's really to sit down and be honest and not to just rely on cliches and sort of accepted retellings of history. Really to sit down and think about what you want to say and what's happened to you.
Look,
And I get when I interview people for oral histories, I really do try to let them talk, but really try to get them to open up, and that's the important thing.
Who influenced you as a writer? Like when you were either in school or post school, and you thought, "Hey, I'm going to start writing," because you've written, as we've said, books. Who influenced you?
I don't know. That's a hard thing to say. I like to write. I like to write. Well, I pick things up along the way. Goes back more to the Jewish discussion. Is I think one of the best. Well, one of the writers who's meant the most to me is Philip Roth, of course. He was.
Stop. Why, of course? Because you'll say that name, and I'll go, well, yeah, Philip Roth. But why Philip Roth?
Well, I'm about to explain.
Okay.
But we interrupt. We're Jews. We do that anyway. First of all, he was from Newark, and I'm from Elizabeth, which is right next door. He once described his writing. He said, "Family, family, family, Newark, 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 Jew, Jew, Jew." He's talking about his father, but he said that's sort of my writing too. And of course, with him, it was also sex, sex, sex. But Roth, a couple of things. One, just the sort of the bravery and the comic energy. And you look at Portnoy's complaint, just from the first page to the last, the driving comic energy in that work, it's really remarkable. And I know a lot of people, when it came out, they were talking about the dirty parts, and they would go up to him and say, Mr. Roth, here's a piece of liver and things like that, because of the famous scene with the liver. but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah. It's been a while, but yes. And
Yes.
it's not even
Anyway,
chopped. Yeah, right, yeah.
yeah. So I fucked the family dinner.
Yes,
It
but I
was
mean,
it
when
was
that book
brilliant
came out, that was shocking, you know.
and so yes, and he's so brave. And but also the other thing about Roth is that he talks about Jews in America. And when you look at how we are in this country, we've prospered here really as we have never have prospered nowhere else. We're able to live, we've been able to live freely, especially after the Second World War. Anti-Semitism has certainly dropped down. All sorts of things are, the Ivy League, the big law firms, all that is open to Jews now. Things are looking dicey at the moment. Still, this has been a land of milk and honey. And yet, I think that we're still not entirely comfortable in the society. I think we think, and I think it's true, that the larger society doesn't really still know quite what to make of us. And so I think that goes through Roth, and I think people will see that in my show. It's that we're so much a fabric of this country, but we're still somehow apart. And I think that
Yeah,
that's in Roth. And just speaking of the writing itself, Roth is just a master of writing these clear, elegant sentences, which I just love.
absolutely. No, it's fine. There's a line in my show. I don't know if you've seen it, and if you haven't, why haven't you? But there's
I've been delinquent.
one person show that I did called Shalom Damn It, an evening with me. And I mentioned
Uh-huh.
the fact that if you went to a Jew living in Germany in 1910 or 1920, and you ask them, what do you think Germany's going to be like in 10, 20 years? They'll be like, well, the same, only a
Yeah,
little better.
right, right.
And 20, who the fuck knows what will happen anywhere
You don't
within
know.
a decade, within 2 decades. So we're
Uh,
comfortable in America. It's been a wonderful place. We don't know
no,
within
you
20
don't.
years. I mean,
No.
we're going to take abortion away. So, there you go. I'll end up having 60 kids. My wife is just, at least she has some relief. We get to kill one or two now and then. But that stops. I'm kidding, anywho. We're talking with Michael Takiff, the author and cast of Jews, God, and History, not necessarily in that order, which you can watch or go see from May 18th through June 5th downtown at the Flea Theater on Thomas Street. So definitely you can see why you're going to want to go see it. But I still have a couple of questions for you. You're going to, wait.
Sure.
Wait.
The link on Facebook.
By the way, if you're watching this and you want to buy tickets, the link to the theater to the show is on Facebook. If you're watching this program, so just go buy tickets now. Go get them, damn it. Right,
Yes,
awesome.
absolutely.
I want to ask you about the before I have to leave and you stay to play the trivia with Dave and David Shuard and Leslie Blake. They're coming in, but the Clinton book. You wrote
Yes.
an entire book about an American president. Did you ever even get to talk to him, or did you ever get any feedback from him or his people after it came out?
I didn't talk to him. I did not. I did send him. I spoke at the Chappaqua Library. I live in Chappaqua, and the librarian there offered to send him a book because she knows him. And I said, "Thank you, Mr. President, for living such an interesting life." I don't know. I haven't heard from him. I have a feeling that there were some things in the book he was not too pleased about. I think it was an eminently fair book, but I certainly laid into him on a couple of places, and people in the book. It's the book. It's called A Complicated Man: The Life of Bill Clinton, as told by those who know him, published by Yale University Press, and it's 170 different people talking about him. And these are political colleagues, political enemies. These are members of Congress, members of the Senate, prominent political pundits, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Secretary of Defense, plus the cousin who took him to the movies when he was 5 years old in Hope, Arkansas, took him to the Saturday afternoon westerns. So I did not speak to Bill himself, but I spoke to just an enormous number of people around him to fill in the story. But
And not Hillary either. I assume she didn't.
I did not speak to. She didn't speak. The Hillary's very careful, and this was written. She was planning to run for president. This was before that, so no, she did not.
So
but,
let me ask you, besides the sex stuff, which I don't give a shit about, which shouldn't have even come up in his presidency, no pun intended. But what was complicated or difficult about him not having to do with Monica or the other women or any of that, just as a leader?
People can look at him in so many different ways. Some people think, great guy, what a terrific guy, so social. So he just was wonderful with people. And other people will say, what a phony, what a jerk. Other people say he was such a dynamic, he was a leader who was able to meet the moment. Other people say he had no principles. He was just too flexible. Some people will say, look at what he did for poor people. Look at the welfare reform. Other people will say, look at how he screwed poor people. Look at the welfare reform. So there's so many different ways of looking at this man. Who's the real guy? Is he this scoundrel, or was he this political genius? And it's interesting. People ask me toward the end of the process. I was meeting with somebody, had an important government official. I'd met with this person a couple of times before, and this person said to me, "Well, now that you're almost done with this, what do you think of Bill Clinton?" And I said, I'm not sure. And this person who had served in the administration said, you know what? Me neither. And a prominent journalist from Arkansas, and these journalists from Arkansas, they knew Bill Clinton better than anyone because they knew him well. He was not in the exalted office of the presidency. They'd see him in Little Rock, they'd see him at the softball game, they'd see him, at the video store, they'd see him at the grocery store. This was a prominent dean of Arkansas journalists, the Little Rock press corps, and he said that every time that Bill Clinton ran for re-election, he'd write an editorial that would say, well, we don't know if he got it right this time, but next time he's really going to get it right. He's really going to do it. But he never quite did. He wasn't a bad governor, but he and this goes for his time as president too. He came in with such high expectations, one of the highest IQs you can imagine, a brilliant, amazingly brilliant man. I can tell you stories about that too, but an amazingly brilliant man with incredible people skills, everyone from world leaders to people at the McDonald's where he stopped for coffee, to one person in a crowd of 100,000 hearing him make a speech. Everyone says, this guy speaks to me. This guy understands who I am. Such gifts. And if you look at his presidency, he did some good things, but were there any great accomplishments? It's hard to say. So I think it's a mixed report card, but everybody's got their own opinion about it, and that's what makes him so fascinating.
Well, it's interesting. I wish I had that level of mystery, because I know people who deal with me, friends, very quickly they hate me, and that just maintains throughout. The hatred is there, and nothing I can do. And it's right. Yeah.
I don't hate you.
You don't? You don't know me long enough.
Am I missing something?
It's only been half an hour.
Should I hate you? Okay, I'll hate you. Okay.
Absolutely, you should hate me. But don't hate me so much that you don't promote your show. Jews, God, and History, not necessarily in that order. Playing soon at the Siggy Theater it's a small theater in the Flea Theater, which is running from May 18th through June 5th of this year. Go get your tickets. The link is on the Facebook feed, and it's also let me make sure people know your it's MICHAELTAKIFF.com, TAKIFF. MICHAELTAKIFF.com. You can also go to gravitashistory.com if you want some help. You're thinking of writing a memoir, telling your story, and you see this man as being able to help you get your story out. Michael Takiff. Now, Michael, please don't go away.
I'm here.
Go away. I am going to go away because there are people who hate me, and they're bill collectors mainly. So, Dave Lefkowitz, who produces and hosts this program, he's coming in a moment to take you through the trivia game with Leslie Hoban Blake and with David Sheward. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you so
Michael,
much.
What is Michael? What's your Hebrew name?
Moshe Mordechai ben Avram HaKohen.
Okay, Mr. Takiff, we thank you very much for being with us on the day. I'm actually going to share my screen. This is kind of cool. I'm gonna share Dave's screen here, if they can let me do this, to show a little trailer thingy of your show, so people can watch and also decide, hey, I'm going to go see this. So let's share. Is it sharing? I got this thing here. Then I'm going to open this up, and we're going to do this, and shalom to you.